Welcome to the February edition of the IIBA Certification Chat. My name is Rich Larson from Watermark Learning, and I want to welcome you with any questions you have about anything IIBA certification related. I see several people have submitted questions already in here, and I want to welcome you to the chat. If you're just joining us, to get a question to me, please locate the GoToWebinar question panel in your toolbar and submit the question that way, and I'll read them in order. And if I have any follow-up questions, I'll just ask, and you can just send more in. So welcome, everybody. And I see one person from Bangalore, India. Welcome. That's on the other side of the world. So I thank you for staying up late to join us today. That's excellent. Planning for the CPAP exam. Excellent. Good. So Sarika says, planning for CPAP, I only have 2 years of experience as a BA. Can I apply directly for the CBAP, or should I first go for CCBA? Well, Sarika, the whole question is how many hours of experience do you have? And one of the slides in your packet, in your handouts, talk about the number of hours. And rather than try to have you focus on this little teeny font, I'm going to mention that the number of hours required for CBAP is 7,500 hours of business analysis experience, not work experience. But that would be really hard to get in 2 years. So my thought is, and question to you is, do you think you have 3,750 hours of BA experience to qualify for the CCBA? If not, maybe you want to wait if you're close to that, or maybe start with the ECBA, which does not require any experience. So I'll ask you, approximately how many hours have you had, do you think, in 2 years? Michelle is asking, what's the best way for me to get started towards getting my CBAP? Are there any resources for logging and keeping track of experience hours? Well, glad you asked that question. But one of the best ways to get started, we think, because we've been devoted to IIBA certification since they first started back in 2007. And we've got in your handouts a list of certification resources. One of the best ways to get started, everybody, and I'm going to try to highlight this. I'm not a fan of the GoToWebinar highlighting, but let's see if I can get it to work. There's some general information here on their website, but there are also different handbooks that you should get started. If you're going to go for the CBAP, of course, download the CBAP information and get the handbook. Secondly, our website has tons of information. Besides the products and services we sell to stay in business, we also have information about getting started, including a really useful application work hours spreadsheet. We've been producing these since really version 1, and we've been refining, and luckily IIBA has made the process simpler for this version of all their certifications. So check that out. There's on that, go to watermarklearning.com/CBAP, and you'll see a way with some links there to be able to download that application spreadsheet. So go for that. That's a quick answer about how you get started. Great. So Lisa is from Illinois. Hello. What kind of a passing score and what kind of questions can be expected on the ECBA? Well, IIBA doesn't really publicize their passing score, but generally for exams of this sort, approximately 70% is required. They may be even more liberal on the ECBA, I'm not sure, but they keep that a deeper secret. But I would use that kind of as a general rule of thumb. The kinds of questions you're going to be asked are knowledge-based questions. So when faced with the need to document data requirements and relationships between different elements, what technique might a BA choose? And you'd have 4 choices, one of which might be a data model, and that would be the right answer. So questions of that sort, knowledge-based, based on the BA body of knowledge. So for the ECBA, CCBA, and CBAP, the questions really are based on that work that IIBA has produced, the BA body of knowledge. And you really have to understand that well. Now for ECBA, with only the 50 questions, you don't have to know it as thoroughly as, say, the CBAP with 120 questions. So there's a lot of terminology that I think you should become familiar with. And so if I can just even recommend something that's helped people in the past, is we have a book that we produce called How to Talk BA. And that one has a lot of references for the BABAC as well as other sources of BA terminology that I think will be useful to you based on students' experience in the past. Shadlia Ben Krayam, if I pronounce your name right, says, I have a voucher for CBAP and started doing the exams, and now I want to switch to CCBA. How can I do it, or should I buy another? If you are talking about a voucher for our online study exams, the best way to do that is to write to us at the email address that's listed here on this slide. I'll highlight it again for you, info@watermarklearning.com. And write with your situation and say, can you switch me to a new exam? If I heard you right for that, if that's what you're asking, that's the way to do it. Check with info. Don, hello from Calgary. Hopefully it's not frigid up there like it is in the Midwest and in the US. Don is going to be taking the CPAP exam in March, and the Watermark Practice Bank has been helping, but do you have tips or a mindset strategy on how to go through 120 questions? Actually, I have several tips, one of which is to do speed tests. You know, we have a simulation built into our tool. It's a really elegant thing because it pulls the questions from the exam bank we've built based on the percentages you're going to see on the real exam. Plus, when you do simulations with the CBAP, we will give you case study questions similar to kinds of case studies you're going to get on the real exam, where you've got a page or two of information, sometimes less, but it's more complex than a normal scenario that's 2 or 3 sentences. So you have to read through that and answer 3 to 5 questions based on the case studies. And so be prepared for that. And so we give you those in the simulation. So make sure you do those and do at least maybe 3 or 4 simulations to get the full flavor of what we have in store for you. So that gets you used to them. And I'm not sure how they spread them out in the real exam, but what we've done is we've got an algorithm for spreading them out inside your exam. So you're not going to get them all at the front or all at the end, but you're going to get a mixture of questions like you might expect to see. Speaking of speed tests, going back to that for a second, we have a timer built in. So I would do at least 1 or 2 practice exams where you are simulating the real thing. So that it's like a dress rehearsal, to use a theater term, or you know, it's a spring training game if you like baseball. So you're doing simulated run-throughs before you get into that exam booth, because I think the #1 reason people fail is, assuming they're prepared and have done all the study, is anxiety. So you get in the exam booth and you're nervous and you're just afraid you're going to fail and you don't want to let your colleagues and your family down, whatever. So getting used to that exam environment by doing some practice runs is really, really helpful. So hopefully that's some good tips to get you going down and everybody else. Robin from Dyer, Indiana. What's the passing score for the CBAP? Again, just like the earlier question about ECBA, we think it's around 70%. The exact cut score, as some people call it, is not published, and nor is I've never seen numbers that show how many people have actually passed or how many people have failed. So assume that. And so just as one tip, if you use our online study exam, we give you percentage correct for each knowledge area as well as for the overall exam. So when you're hitting around 80% on all the different knowledge areas, or 80% overall, we feel that that's probably enough use of our study tool. It's not going to ensure you pass, of course. We don't ever guarantee that. Nobody can on that basis. But I think that you want to overshoot the mark a little bit. In other words, go beyond that 70% I mentioned so that you feel overly prepared. That's another thing that we really believe in, that gives you that. If you go for 90 or 100% on our exams, that means you've probably spent too much time with the tool and have perhaps even memorized some questions and answers. So that's why we don't ever suggest 100%. Jigar, hello. Will 2 months be good enough to prepare for the CPAP exam? It can be, depending how many hours you devote in that 2 months. He's got the study guide, flashcards, and also preparing with the online exam test. That should be enough time. Now, just to give you a little bit of perspective, in the past, when we've done research, people have said that they spend about 100 hours preparing for the CBAP. So I would divide that over the 2 months, figure out how many hours per week you should devote, and that should be enough time. People claim they've done it in 2 weeks, but that's like a lot of cramming, and maybe they're good test takers. I think that's just too much pressure on you for the most part. So I think 2 months is great. Just bear that 100-hour metric in mind as far as planning your study. So Don is saying, is 70% passing the same for CBAP or 80%? Yeah, I think you're repeating another question that just came up. Yeah, the 70% is pretty much a good number to use across the board to figure what the passing score is on an exam. Nicole is asking, should you get an IIBA membership before or after you write the exam for ECBA? I suggest you get the IIBA membership before you even apply. And the reason is the fees are lower if you're a member. So I would definitely get that membership before you even apply. Satish, hello from Chennai, India. Well, you're staying up late as well too. I'm flattered that you're on this call. Thank you. Planning to take the CBAP certification. 2 questions. How many hours of study is required? I just answered that. Good. It's on people's minds. We always recommend about 100 hours on average. If you take a class, that reduces that number of hours because you'll be doing plenty of studying during class. Number 2, can you please share how to approach a case study? One thing about the CBAP case study questions, and I'm going to launch a poll in just a second to see the different interest levels in different exams here. With the case studies, what you want to do is look at the questions first. Now, we don't always suggest it. Normally, we suggest read the question and then look at the answers. But for the case study, you can maybe glance at the case study first. Don't read it in any depth. Go to the questions to see what the questions are asking, what kinds of things they're trying to ask you to pull out of the case study. Then go back and read the case in full, in detail. That's probably your best approach, I think, for handling that, best strategy for approaching case studies. So before I go any further, let me launch that poll that asks, which kind of certification are you interested in? So I'm going to launch this poll. Hopefully you can all see that. Yep, you're answering now, so that tells me you can. So please check in, and I'll display the results in a second about what certifications are you in. Because a lot of these questions about things like the case studies or the 120 questions are definitely CBAP for sure. And people are weighing in. 75% of you have voted, so I'm going to close the poll because most of you are there. You can see the results. 64% of you are CBAP, but equal numbers of CCBA, ECBA at 20, and then equal numbers IIBA-AAC, and not sure. Speaking of IIBA-AAC, maybe this is a good time for me to switch gears. I'm going to close that. I'm going to hide the poll. And I'm going to go to a question from Semyon, who asked, are the new certification from IIBA the IIBA-AAC? He or she says, I don't have the 2 years minimum experience that they would like me to have prior to the exam. So I'm wondering what tips and tricks would be recommended to close the gap. Well, first of all, that 2-year recommendation is just a guideline. You don't need to have any experience, and I would go so far as to say that I think that certification can still be valid even if you don't have experience in it. And why? Because you're going to learn a lot about Agile when you just study the Agile extension. And should you pursue it and then get that certification, even without experience on your resume, it shows a potential employer that you have the dedication, the interest, the energy, the ability to learn the information and to demonstrate your knowledge in the exam. And while that is never a substitute for experience, it makes you stand above other people who also want to get into Agile without any experience as well. And so I think that gives you a career boost. Simeon's also asking, I want to know if there's consistency in the wording of the questions between the ECBA and the AAC. I have to say, first of all, I don't know about the exact questions, but from things I've heard, there is a, shall we say, a wide variety of question writers that IIBA has used. And that the questions are not always written in the best English or the best grammar or whatever. Now, in our online study exam, we strive for quality, and we can't always say we're the best, but we have some English majors that have helped write the questions. So I think we probably have better written questions than IIBA does. But that, and I don't mean to say that to brag. I just mean that there's a lot of difference in quality. So I can't say that there's going to be consistency. What you're going to see though are, what is very consistent across all the exams is that you'll have a question and you'll have 4 discrete answers. It'll be an A, B, C, or D. You won't get those kind of things we may have gotten in school where, oh, answer B and C might be right, or none of the above, or all the above. You're not going to get that. It's used on a better methodology than people might have thrown at you in school. So there is definitely consistency there. You're going to get a question and then 4 discrete answers. Don is saying, if I purchase the exam bank, will I have access to study materials as well? Now, that's a great question. And something we thought about a lot, but for now, it's just the exam bank. Perhaps in the future we could launch something that gives you like a premium membership or something of that sort, but we've not done that so far. I'll take a note of that though. Michelle says, do you offer in-person training in the Pensacola area? You know, Michelle, I really wish we did. We have in the past launched classes when there's been enough interest in an area. Usually it's driven by IIBA chapters. And we're talking to a couple now, one in Iowa and one in Las Vegas, about doing classes for their members. I'm going to sign up for the Vegas. No, just kidding. But there are usually enough people in those areas to help us get classes launched. Because what we hate to do is schedule a class in an area and then have to cancel it because we can't find enough interest. So we've relied on virtual training for certification classes to carry the day, and then ask for people in individual areas such as yours, Michelle, to contact us if you have a group of people that we can then put a class together. So we've done that on and off over the years, and it has worked well. So thanks for that question. Great. Yegor says, how close are the IIBA CCBA questions to those that Watermark Learning has in its practice exams? He goes on to say, about the same, more difficult or easier, kind of all the above. First of all, one thing about our online study exams is that we have a focus on helping you learn the BA body of knowledge. So we err a little bit on having more knowledge-based questions than you might get on the actual exam. That's certainly true for CBAP. Because we have lots of case studies, but we don't have an exhaustive amount to let you do multiple simulations to be able to have unique questions each time. So it gets complicated. But for CCBA, there are no case studies. They're just situational kinds of things, which we have several of, as well as knowledge-based questions. So to that extent, you might think ours are easier, but on another note, people have given us feedback saying our questions are harder than the real thing. So I think it's very subjective, Yegor, to answer your question. I think we strive for kind of some level of consistency because we understand the BABAC very well. We pull questions on it based on, you know, our experience having taken tests before to kind of the tenor and the tone. And sometimes people have said it's the same tenor and tone as a real exam. So I think with our emphasis on help you learn the BABAC, and B, the feedback we get that they're similar in tenor and tone, and C, with the positive feedback we've gotten from people saying it's helped them pass their exam, we think we're on the right track. So I didn't exactly answer your question because I don't really know. I mean, as far as we as vendors are not permitted, nor should we look at and see the actual questions. That would violate our code of conduct. All right, Judy is saying, interested in CBAP. Good. What's the ratio of scenario versus memorizing versus case study? We are told by IIBA that there's maybe a third. Now, I think a third, and a third. I've heard different accounts of that. I think some people say there may be up to 40% case study, 40% scenario, and 20%. I call it knowledge based, and what you said is memorizing. I think if you use the 40-40-20, that's kind of a conservative estimate, so you get the case studies. And so what we need to do in our practice exam is make sure you do enough simulations. Do at least, I'd say do at least 4 simulations of those 120 questions. I know that's a lot, but that's your best way to experience our case studies, because that's where we present them to you. Michael asks, do you need an in-depth knowledge of all 50 techniques? My first quick answer is no. He goes on to say, how many technique-related questions can we expect? You can expect a lot. And that's a vague answer, but I would think that easily a third of the exam, if not more, would be related to techniques, maybe even half. Because while they don't say how many techniques questions they have, we do know that they are intermingled with the other knowledge areas. And so if you look at the blueprint, your handouts have the blueprint for that, and there are no techniques listed here for level 2 and 3, CCBA or CBAP. They list that for ECBA, and for some reason they just didn't do that for the others. So you can expect several. Now, how do you prepare for that? I get asked that question a lot with those 50 techniques. I think, first of all, you have to read the entire chapter, what is it, chapter 9, all the techniques. Or is it chapter 10? Yeah, whatever. The techniques, those 50. If you bought our study guide, it's one way to help you understand those techniques better than just reading the Babak, make them come alive. Now, in our little information thing here, there's another book that we like to recommend down here for, let me highlight it, down here. In addition to our study guide, the Software Requirements 3rd edition by Carl Wiegers and Joy Beatty is a good reference for some of the techniques to let you sink your teeth into to understand them better. It's also then a good reference on the job. We think our study guide's a reference on the job as well, because it's a way to understand and make sense out of the BA body knowledge. So hopefully that helps to understand those techniques. You don't need them in depth, but you really need to understand, because you don't know what you're going to get asked. Sarika's asking, I have one more question. I can see at your PDF the exam time for ECBA is 1.5 hours. Yep. I would like to confirm it's 1.5 hours or 1 hour. I thought it was 1.5 hours. Let's see, where's our little PDF? Yeah. Did you see something else, Sarika, that says it might be an hour? I think 1 hour would probably not be enough, but shoot me back another follow-up if you would. Shadlia is asking, when I started CBAP, I worked by knowledge area, and I had good scores, but when I got to do the 120 questions, I got lost and decided to go for CCBA. Well, that's an interesting observation. We provide those knowledge areas exams that we call drills to let you focus on one knowledge area at a time. The 120 question simulation is designed to pull it together like the real exam. And I think you probably did the best thing, used our exam as feedback and decided to go for CCBA. And be curious, when did you make that choice, and how far along have you gotten? Speaking of that, I have another poll about that very subject. How far along are you? So I'm going to launch this other poll right now and ask you folks, how far into your process are you? So like Shadlia, you could write me back a note too as far as how far you are, since we're talking about it. So, all right. Okay, most people have voted. I'm going to show the poll, share it with you. A majority are just looking into it, so thanks for tuning in to get more information. We hold these every month, so I urge you to come back as you go through your study. If you're 23% are in process of applying, so really about half of you or more are either looking into it or just applying. And there are 16% of you, your exam is coming up soon. All right, so I'm going to hide the poll. So if you have any questions about that, I'm very glad to answer those as well. Michael asks, are the questions that appear in the Watermark products taken from actual IIBA exams? I kind of answered this already. We don't know what's in the actual IIBA exams. Just real simply, our methodology is to study the BABOK, look for nuggets of information that we think would be challenging questions and present them to you. Not just anything, not just some obscure corner of the BABOK, but things that are very central to the work that BAs do. Having been BAs ourselves, we've been in the training business for a lot of years. We know what is more likely for a test creator from IIBA to put into the exam. So using that kind of knowledge, we put together our own questions. And as I said before, we know what the tenor and the tone of the questions are. So do not expect us to have a mirror of the real exam. We've never espoused that, and any vendor that does is violating its code of conduct. You know, ours are similar in tenor and tone, like I've said, but we don't really even want to know because we don't want to violate that code. Don is asking, what has been your professional outcome been before and after getting the certification? Has it helped you a lot, and if so, how? Are you asking me personally? As a vendor and a trainer, I felt it was a must to have that. I've not done a full-time BA job for a long time. So as far as helping me in the marketplace, I can't speak to that. If you're a consultant, I think this CBAP or CCBA is pretty helpful. In fact, a lot of interest in CCBA has been driven by consulting companies who have hired people and after a couple of years get them through the CCBA. For workers, we've had a wide variety of interest from employers in getting CBAP and wanting their employees to do that. And we get asked for on-site training frequently by people who really are in need of basic BA training. So that's an interesting sidelight, is that the certifications are ways to help level set people to get into certain base knowledge, a commonality of terminology and so forth. So I think there's a lot of interest amongst employers out there for that. So that's kind of a subjective answer, but I think it's the best one I can come up with on the spur of the moment. I don't have a study to help back me up or whatever. Dimitri says, hard in teaching, easy in battle. There you go. I like that. Michael says, good answers. Nicole, did you see it's only 1 hour as well for ECBA? I'm going to have to look that up because only 1 hour. We might have taken something from an early on publication from IIBA, and so if we're wrong, I really apologize for that, for putting it out. So an hour is not a long time for 50 questions, though. So that's something you're going to have to move through the questions quickly. Judy says, what % of applications are audited by the IIBA? Well, they don't release that either, but kind of know that there's enough that there's a chance you're going to get audited. I was audited. I was one of the early adopters, so it's sort of like jury duty. If you live in a small municipality, you're more likely to be called for jury duty. And so I got audited. The experience is not bad. Just make sure that you have documentation for the professional development hours, the BA training, your high school or college diploma. Make sure you have that. Make sure you have your contacts briefed. So IIBA will contact your contacts that you list on your application so that they will let them know they're going to be contacted so they're not surprised. Sarika list, thanks. Okay, yeah, the link for ECBA is also too in our little handout here. Thank you for that, Sarika. It's showing 1 hour online, so I got confused. Thank you for checking that out. Uh, Someone asked, do my letters of recommendation need to be recent? Well, your letters of recommendation, I'm confused by that. First of all, are you asking about your references? The references you provide IIBA, there need two of them, need to either be a career manager, somebody who you work with on projects as a client of yours, or a CBAP. So to that extent, I don't think there's necessarily a time limit. Or the experience, though, you got to go back only 10 years. Your career manager is pretty self-explanatory, so that's more recent. So I'm not aware of any limitation on time, but it has to be in the parameters of the projects that you've done within the last 10 years. That's probably the biggest thing. So if that's not what you mean by letters of recommendation, I am not sure. And by the way, I'm on the ECBA. I'll confirm that, and we'll include an update in our email that goes out after the call here. Speaking of which, I can stay on and answer further questions. If you have to leave because this is really only scheduled for a half hour, you can tune into the end of the recording if you'd like to get any more questions. Yigar is asking, by reflecting your CPAP exam, what were 3 things you would or would not do to clear the exam in the short term? Well, one of the 3 things I would have done is study more. I didn't put in the 100 hours. I was overly confident. My PMP experience, I dragged out for well over 2 years. I procrastinated. I studied probably 200 or 300 hours for that. I did overkill. So on the CBAP, I thought, well, I passed. I had much easier time than I thought I would. And so I understudied, I think, my CBAP. Especially I felt more confident about my business analysis knowledge. So I would make sure I would get closer to that 100 hour, number 1. Number 2, I didn't have that many practice questions available, but I think that really would have helped me. I just tried to study based on the BABAC and some other reading in our courses and my knowledge. I really think you have to have the practice questions. By the way, our research also shows that practice questions were the number 1 thing that people rated as far as what helped them the most. Number 3, I crammed the night before my exam, and I don't think that helped. I remember I was up late studying, and it didn't really help my anxiety level. So I think I wouldn't cram. So those are 3 quick things. Hopefully that's helpful to everyone as far as that goes. We also have at the end here of, whoops, not the end, slide number 6, a list of 10 tips that we recommend that give you some ideas of what to do as far as test taking. Hi, Mega. You might have already answered this. Do you have to take ECBA to do CCBA and CBAP? Answer is no. That's not a progression. You certainly can, as you first enter the field, get that CCBA. After you build up the 3,750 hours, go for the CCBA, and then after the 7,500 hours, become a CBAP. IIBA has laid them out that way as a possible path for you to take, but you do not need that. You can certainly jump in at any level. CM is saying that's what you meant by letters of reference. Okay. Jordan says, any idea how the IIBA-AAC certification compares to the Scrum Alliance product owner certification? I think the AAC is more rigorous. First of all, there's no exam currently for the product owner. There will be in the future, they've announced, but there is no exam, at least I don't know of any yet. And AAC has, an 85 question exam, and it's based on a, what should we say, it's not a body of knowledge, it's an extension to the BABAC. It's a fairly short thing. If you're going to go for the AAC, you got to get that, download that, it's free. Get it from IIBA, read it thoroughly and understand it. So it has some written material that you can use to base it on. So potentially the questions are perhaps more incisive and more tricky than they might be for CSPO, because I think a lot of CSPO classes, if they were to add an exam, would probably be much like the CSM, where there's an incredibly high passing rate for it. So I think in general the AAC be more difficult. Last thing I'm going to say about it is it's very focused on agile business analysis. And if that is your career path, that gives you, I think, a better focus. And CSPO is meant for a product owner. Not all business analysts are or should be product owners. That's a whole nother discussion we could have. And a lot of people say, yeah, a BA can act as a product owner. I don't want to get into that debate right now, but the fact of the matter is, I think the AAC gets into more depth of what a BA needs to do. The product owner focuses on things that a business leader might be in need of, and that's not necessarily a BA role. So, all right, I think we're just about out of questions, and so I'm going to call an end unless you've got any last minute questions. I can, Michelle, thanks. Thanks for the agreement. I appreciate that. We've been sort of fighting that battle for a long time, and I'm so glad IIBA has come out with a certification because it gives some focus on the agile business analyst, and so I think it's a very good move for our industry. Any other last minute thoughts, comments, questions? And we'll, like I said, give you access to these handouts, the recording, and I will research the ECBA question about is it an hour or two. So I'm going to call it an end today and stop the recording. So thank you very much for attending. It's been great chatting, and come back next month for the next edition of this IIBA chat. Bye-bye.